February 24th, 1945, just east of the Irrawaddy River, central Burma. The heat does not simply rise in the Burmese dry belt. It presses down, a physical weight of 100 degrees that turns the air inside a tank hull into a suffocating oven. The dust is worse. It is a fine, talcum powder silt that invades everything, clogging carburetors, grit-blasting eyes, and coating the sweaty skin of the men of the Imperial Japanese Army's 14th Tank Regiment. Colonel Noi, commanding the regiment, stands in the open turret of his Type 97 Chi-Ha Kai. He wipes a layer of grime from his binoculars and scans the shimmering horizon to the west. The terrain here is a deceptive tapestry of dry paddy fields, scrub brush, and stands of toddy palms. To the uninitiated, it looks flat. To a tank commander, it is a maze of potential traps, soft ground that can swallow a track, irrigation dikes that expose a tank's belly, and dense groves perfect for an ambush. Noi feels a certain grim confidence. For years, the Japanese propaganda machine and military doctrine have preached a singular truth. Western armor is clumsy. The Americans and British, they say, build tanks like they build factories, large, cumbersome, and utterly unsuited for the Asian theater. They are road-bound beasts. They will not bring the heavy ones this far, a young lieutenant remarks from the ground, leaning against the riveted hull of the colonel's tank. He pats the steel affectionately. The terrain will break their transmissions before they even see us. The lieutenant is referring to the rumors of the M4 Sherman. Intelligence reports claim the British 14th Army is dragging these 30-ton monsters through the jungle. The Japanese officers scoff at the idea. Their own tanks, the Type 97s, weigh roughly 15 tons. They are agile, designed to support infantry, capable of threading through rubber plantations and traversing wooden bridges. To the Japanese command, the Sherman is a bloated ox, too heavy to cross the loose sands of the riverbanks, too wide for the jungle tracks. In the officers' mess tent the night before, the mood had been almost dismissive. They mocked the silhouette of the American tank, tall, flat-sided, a barn door of a target. They joked about the Ronson lighter reputation, claiming they burn with a single hit. They believed that if the British did manage to drag Shermans across the Irrawaddy, the tanks would be sluggish and blind. The Japanese plan is simple. Use the terrain. Let the heavy Allied tanks flounder in the soft earth, then utilize the superior agility of the Chi-Ha to flank them and put a 47mm high-velocity shell through the thinner side armor. It is a comforting thought, but it is a delusion born of isolation. The Japanese tank design philosophy halted somewhere around 1939. The Chi-Ha Kai under Colonel Noi's boots is an improvement over the older models, boasting a new turret and a 47mm gun, but its armor is still held together by rivets. In a world of welding and cast steel, rivets are a death sentence. When hit, even if the shell doesn't penetrate, the rivets can shear off and ricochet inside the cabin like shrapnel bullets, shredding the crew. The armor plating itself is barely an inch thick at its strongest point. They are bringing knives to a gunfight, but they have convinced themselves they are wielding katanas. "Check the camouflage again," Noi orders, his voice dry. "If the British come, they will come down the road. We will hit them from the palm grove." The crew scatters to pull more palm fronds over the chassis. They work with the discipline of veterans, but their equipment betrays them. The suspension of the Type 97s squeaks and groans. The engines sputter with a distinct, rattling cough. They are unaware that 40 miles to the west, the ground is trembling with a very different sound. It is a low, synchronized rumble, deeper and more resonant than anything the Japanese motor pool can produce. It is the sound of the Wright Continental radial engines and Ford GAA V8s. The British Fourth Corps is not just bringing tanks, they are bringing a sledgehammer. The 254th Indian Tank Brigade and the British 255th Indian Tank Brigade are on the move, and they are spearheading the assault with M4 Shermans. These are not the early war-light tanks the Japanese bullied in Malaya in 1942. These are medium tanks with 75mm main guns, cannons capable of firing high-explosive shells that can vaporize an infantry squad, or armor-piercing rounds that can tear through a Type 97 from front to back, engine block included. Back at the Japanese forward post, a scout comes running in, breathless, dust caked around his mouth. He bows hastily to the colonel. "Dust clouds, sir. Massive. 10 kilometers west." Colonel Noy nods, stepping down into the cramped fighting compartment of his tank. He feels the familiar vibration as the diesel engine kicks over. He believes he is about to teach the clumsy Westerners a lesson in mobility and spirit. He believes the Bushido spirit of his crews will overcome the material weight of the enemy. He does not realize that the era of the Japanese tank is about to end. The Shermans are not getting stuck. They are not bogging down. They are widening the trails, crushing the trees, and rolling inexorably toward Mektila with a momentum that physics and the Japanese Imperial Army cannot stop. The trap is set, but the Japanese do not yet know they are the ones inside it. February 25th, 1945. The Nyangu Bridgehead, western bank of the Irrawaddy. To the soldiers of the British 14th Army, the Irrawaddy River is not just a body of water. It is a psychological barrier. At over a mile wide in places, swollen with currents and flanked by treacherous soft sand, it is a natural fortress. Lieutenant General William Slim knows this. He also knows that the Japanese are banking on this river to protect their flank. They believe no army in history could ferry an armored division across this expanse in secret, let alone sustain it on the other side. But the forgotten army is done playing by the rules. Down at the water's edge, the air is thick with the smell of diesel exhaust and wet mud. The noise is deafening, a cacophony of shouting engineers, revving engines, and the metallic clank, clank, clank of steel tracks on steel pontoons. Inside the turret of a Sherman 5 belonging to the 255th Indian Tank Brigade, the loader, a young Punjabi soldier, wipes sweat from his forehead with a rag already black with grease. He looks at his commander, a British major, bracing himself against the hatch rim. "Driver, ease her forward," the major says into the intercom. "Gently. Treat her like she's made of glass." The 30-ton M4 Sherman creeps forward. Its tracks bite into the timber decking of the raft. The vessel groans under the massive weight, dipping alarmingly low into the brown, churning water. For a heart-stopping second, it feels as if the laws of buoyancy are about to fail. The water laps inches from the deck. If they shift too far left or right, the tank slides off, dragging the crew to the bottom of the Irrawaddy in a steel coffin. This is the gamble. The Japanese assumed the Shermans were too heavy for the primitive infrastructure of Burma. They were right. So, the Allies brought their own infrastructure. Bailey bridges, rafts, and tugs, fabricated in India and hauled hundreds of miles through the jungle, are now ferrying the iron fist of the 14th Army across the water. As the raft churns toward the eastern bank, the crew watches the far shore. It is silent. The Japanese defenders are there, hidden in the tall elephant grass and dry chong beds, but they are holding their fire. They are waiting for the tanks to hit the sand. Let them come, the Japanese observers think from their concealed bunkers. The sand is soft. The Sherman is fat. It will sink to its belly, and then we will burn it. The raft strikes the eastern bank with a dull thud. The ramp drops. "Driver, advance! Give it some stick!" The right continental engine roars, a deep-throated bellow that scatters the birds from the nearby palms. The Sherman lurches forward. The tracks hit the silt. For a moment, the tank slows. The tracks spin, throwing up rooster tails of wet sand. The Japanese machine gunners in the tree line tighten their grips on their triggers, grinning. Here it is, the blunder. But the Sherman does not stop. The wide tracks find traction. The vertical volute spring suspension, VVSS, compresses and rebounds, absorbing the uneven ground. With a surge of horsepower that shakes the ground, the tank hauls itself up the bank, crushing the reeds and mounting the solid earth beyond. Then, another Sherman lands. Then, another. Within hours, a squadron is forming up on the eastern bank, their long 75mm guns traversing toward the tree line. The silence of the Japanese positions breaks. A hidden anti-tank gun, a 37mm relic, barks from a camouflaged position 300 yards away. The shell screams across the clearing and slams into the glacis plate of the lead Sherman. Clang! The sound is like a sledgehammer hitting an anvil. The crew inside flinches, ears ringing. But the commander checks his periscope. No penetration. The small-caliber Japanese shell has bounced harmlessly off the sloped frontal armor, leaving nothing more than a gray smudge on the olive-drab paint. "Traverse left! High explosive! Bunker at 10 o'clock!" The Sherman's turret rotates with a mechanical whine, faster than any hand-cranked Japanese turret. The 75mm gun levels out. Boom! The HE shell obliterates the Japanese position in a cloud of dirt, logs, and body parts. This is the shock. The Japanese infantry are used to fighting against light Stuart tanks or armored cars, vehicles they can disable with suicide lunge mines or well-placed heavy machine gun fire. They are not prepared for this. The Shermans begin to push inland, moving not in a single-file column on the road, as the Japanese predicted, but spreading out in a line abreast, crushing through the scrub. They are knocking down trees to create their own roads. A Japanese squad, panicked by the wall of steel advancing on them, attempts a desperate charge with magnetic mines. They break cover, screaming, sprinting toward the lead tank. The Sherman doesn't even slow down. The bow gunner opens up with his .30 caliber Browning, sawing through the grass. The coaxial machine gun in the turret joins in. The infantry attack is cut to ribbons before they get within 50 yards. General Slim's gamble has paid off. The heavy armor is across the river. The paper tigers are actually iron monsters, and they are hungry. They turn their turrets toward the strategic prize of Mektila, rolling over the soft ground that was supposed to be their grave. The road to the 14th Tank Regiment is open. February 29th, 1945. The approaches to Mektela. The dust has settled into a suffocating haze. Colonel Noy's 14th Tank Regiment lies in wait, concealed within a dense grove of toddy palms and bamboo thickets just outside the town. They are the last line of defense. From his position, Noy watches the tree line through the slit of his commander's cupola. His heart hammers against his ribs. The reports from the river crossing were confusing. Panic-stricken infantry babbling about iron fortresses that refused to die. Noy dismissed them as cowardice. Infantrymen always exaggerate the size of tanks. But the ground is shaking again. Engine off, Noy whispers into the throat mic. Listen. Silence falls over the grove, save for the chirping of cicadas. Then the sound comes, the crushing of vegetation. It is not the high-pitched whine of Japanese diesel engines. It is a deep, throaty roar. Through the gaps in the bamboo, the green shapes emerge. They are monstrous. To the crews of the Type 97s, accustomed to their own cramped, rivet-holed vehicles, the M4 Shermans look like moving buildings. They stand nearly 9 feet tall, their cast hulls sloping aggressively, their 75mm guns projecting forward with terrifying authority. Wait, Noy breathes. Wait for the flank. The Japanese doctrine relies on close-range ambushes. They must let the Shermans pass, exposing their thinner side armor and rear engine grills. It is a tactic of desperation, requiring nerves of steel. The lead Sherman, a tank named Destruction by its British crew, rumbles past the concealed position of Lieutenant Sato's Type 97. The Sherman is so close that Sato can see the stowage boxes welded to the hull and the spare track links bolted to the side. Range, 100 meters, Sato's gunner whispers, his hand trembling on the elevation wheel. Targeting the flank. Fire, Sato screams. The Type 97 bucks violently as the 47mm high-velocity gun fires. In the confined space of the turret, the noise is deafening. The crew watches through the smoke, expecting to see the American tank erupt in flames. The shell strikes the Sherman just above the tracks on the side hull. There is a spark, a flash of light, and a sharp crack. But there is no fire. There is no explosion. The 47mm armor-piercing round, the best anti-tank weapon the Japanese have, simply shatters against the 38mm hardened steel of the Sherman's side. It gouges the paint, leaving a bright metal scar, and deflects harmlessly into the dirt. Inside the Japanese tank, time seems to freeze. The gunner stares at the sight, his mouth open. It bounced, sir." The Sherman stops. The turret does not panic. It does not jerk wildly. It rotates with a smooth hydraulic hum, turning 70 degrees to the right. The black pupil of the 75mm muzzle stares directly at Sato's hiding spot. "Reverse!" Sato screams. "Driver, reverse!" The driver slams the gears, but the Type 97 is sluggish. The engine coughs black smoke as the tracks struggle for grip. It is too late. The Sherman fires. The physics of the engagement are cruel. The Sherman's 75mm M3 gun fires a shell weighing nearly 15 pounds. The Type 97 is protected by less than an inch of steel plate, held together by rivets. The impact is catastrophic. The Allied shell doesn't just penetrate, it smashes through the front glacis of the Japanese tank like a hammer through plywood. The kinetic energy alone rips the front plate off its frame. Inside, the rivets shear off, transforming into supersonic shrapnel that ricochets wildly around the fighting compartment. The Type 97 shudders and dies instantly, smoke pouring from every hatch. Colonel Noy watches his lieutenant's tank die from 50 yards away. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. We cannot hurt them. "All units, engage! Engage!" Noy yells, his voice cracking. The ambush springs, but it is not a battle. It is an execution. Japanese tanks burst from cover, their engines screaming as they try to circle the Shermans, attempting to get behind them. They move with agility, darting through the trees, but the Shermans simply pivot. A Sherman tank commander, seeing a Type 97 charging him, doesn't even bother with an armor-piercing round. He loads high explosive. The HE shell hits the turret of the charging Japanese tank. The explosion blows the turret clean off the chassis, sending it cartwheeling into the air. The hull continues rolling forward for a few yards, a headless metal corpse, before grinding to a halt. The clumsy Shermans are not clumsy. They are deliberate. They absorb hit after hit from the frantic Japanese 47mm guns, the shells sparking off their frontal armor like hail on a tin roof. In return, they deliver one-shot kills. The jungle, which the Japanese believed was their ally, becomes a trap. The Shermans simply bulldoze through the brush that the Japanese tanks have to navigate around. They push over palm trees, crushing the Japanese infantry hiding in the tops. Noy watches as his regiment, the pride of the division, is systematically dismantled. A Type 97 to his left takes a hit to the ammunition storage. A pillar of fire erupts from the commander's hatch, reaching 30 feet into the air. This is not a battle of maneuver. It is a collision of eras. The industrial might of 1945 has just met the design philosophy of 1938, and the result is absolute carnage. March 1st, 1945. The ruins of the 14th Tank Regiment. The battle has devolved from a tactical engagement into a junkyard fire. The sun is beginning to set over Migdala, casting long, distorted shadows through the smoke that rises from the burning carcasses of the 14th Tank Regiment. Colonel Noy is no longer issuing orders. There is no one left to receive them. His command tank, the Chiha Kai, is trapped against a thick embankment. The engine has stalled, choked by dust and overheating. Through his periscope, he sees the battlefield not as a commander, but as a witness to the death of an ideal. To his right, a Type 97 burns with a ferocity that turns the steel hull white-hot. The ammunition inside begins to cook off. Pop, pop, boom, sending jagged shards of metal spinning into the twilight. To his left, another Japanese tank lies upside down, flipped over like a toy by the sheer concussive force of a close-range 75mm impact. The Shermans are closing the net. They do not rush. They move with a terrifying, methodical slowness. They are predators that know their prey has nowhere to run. Noy watches a Sherman 5 emerge from the smoke, barely 50 yards away. It is covered in dust, its olive-drab paint scratched and scarred, but it is undeniably whole. The crew has mounted sandbags on the front hull and welded spare track links to the turret cheeks, an improvised armor upgrade that makes the tank look even more brutish. A surviving Japanese infantryman, perhaps driven mad by the slaughter, breaks cover from a foxhole. He clutches a lunge mine, a hollow charge warhead on the end of a bamboo pole. It is a suicide weapon, the last resort of an army that has run out of options. He screams, sprinting toward the Sherman, intending to ram the charge into the tracks. The Sherman's turret doesn't even traverse. The commander simply unlatches the hatch, pivots the pintle-mounted 50 caliber heavy machine gun, and fires a short, thunderous burst. The heavy rounds tear the soldier apart before he gets within 30 feet. The threat is erased with casual, almost bored efficiency. Inside his tank, Noy feels the vibration of the approaching steel monster. He remembers the laughter in the mess tent. He remembers the jokes about the Yankee brick, the slow ox. We were wrong, he thinks. It is not an ox. It is a rhino. The Sherman effectively ignored the Japanese tank doctrine. It didn't care about agility because it didn't need to dodge. It didn't care about soft ground because it brought the engineering to cross it. The Japanese believed in spirit. The Allies believed in horsepower and high explosive filler. The lead Sherman rotates its gun toward Noy's stationary tank. The black eye of the muzzle stares him down. There is no dramatic final duel. Noy's gunner is dead, slumped over the breech. The driver has fled. Noy closes his eyes, his hand resting on the katana beside his seat. The 75mm gun fires. The shell strikes the turret ring. The explosion shears the turret entirely off the chassis, lifting tons of steel into the air and slamming it down into the mud. The silence that follows is instantaneous and absolute. By the time the sun dips below the horizon, the battle for Mektila is effectively over. The 14th Tank Regiment ceases to exist as a fighting force. The field is littered with a twisted wreckage of Japanese armor, riveted plates torn asunder, tracks unspooled like dead snakes. British and Indian troops move forward, walking cautiously behind the Shermans. They pass the burning wrecks, looking at them with a mixture of horror and relief. They see the holes punched through the Japanese armor, clean, circular entry wounds that spell instant death for the crews inside. General Slim's gamble has reshaped the theater. The capture of Mektila cuts the main Japanese supply line to Rangoon. The Japanese 15th and 33rd Armies are now strangled, their backs broken by the very machines they mocked. In the European theater, the Sherman was often criticized. It struggled against the heavy German cats, the tigers and panthers that could kill it from 2 kilometers away. But here, in the steaming jungles of Burma, the Sherman is the apex predator. It is reliable, repairable, and virtually invulnerable to the weapons thrown against it. As night falls, the crew of the lead Sherman climbs out to refuel. They light cigarettes, the orange glow illuminating their soot-stained faces. They kick the mud off their boots, the same mud the Japanese swore would trap them. One of the British tankers walks over to the remains of a Type 97. He runs a gloved hand over the thin, riveted armor, shaking his head. "Tin cans," he mutters, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Poor bastards never stood a chance. The mockery has come full circle. The arrogance of the Japanese command, their refusal to adapt, and their dismissal of Western engineering led them into the crushing treads of the M4. In the end, the Sherman didn't just defeat the Japanese tanks, it ran them over.